Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. This is Wendy. Today I've got 4 farmhouse fall home decor DIYs for you. If this is your first time here, welcome, and I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. If you like these projects, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think, and now, without further ado, let's get started. For our first project, I'm going to be using this 6x9 canvas drop cloth that I get from Walmart for $9.97. And then I purchased this gingham transfer iron-on vinyl from Amazon, and I'll have it linked in my Amazon store. So I just cut out a design that I purchased from my silhouette store, and it's of a pumpkin, and so I'm gonna cut that out by placing my vinyl upside down, and then once it's cut out, then I'm just gonna weed out the outside parts of that material. And it's kind of like a plasticky, I don't know, some kind of fabric. So once it gets ironed on, it does feel like fabric. So this is the first time I'm using it. I probably should have chosen a less detailed design for my pumpkin, but that's just one of the many lessons I will learn from doing this project. So after I get it all weeded out, and I really couldn't even see where it was cut after it went through my silhouette, but I just stuck with it and pulled it up carefully, and it was super cutie patootie once I got it all weeded out. So then I used some Cricut brand iron-on transfer vinyl, and I cut out the words pumpkin spice and Jesus Christ. I thought that was super cute. And if ever you need inspiration for cute sayings or something to put on your projects, you can always go to Pinterest, and they have so many different ideas. So now I'm going to take my canvas and double it over, and then I'm going to use my everyday pillow to measure how big I want this. I'm going to make this to cover my non-seasonal throw pillows that go on my couch, and then when the season's over, I can just change it out. So I just laid my canvas out and then rolled it over in thirds to make my square 19.5 by 19.5. And I also made sure that there was enough fabric to fold over for a hem for when I put this together. So the sweet people over at Cricut sent me this Easy Press 2, and I'm just going to set the temperature to 370 and let that preheat. This is really neat because there's also a timer so that you know how long to leave it on the fabric. So I'm going to first start by getting it warmed up and flattened out, and I put some fabric underneath so that I had a little cushion under my transfer. So now I'm going to place my pieces, and I cut around my design so that I didn't have any of the transfer tape doubled up. And so then once I get that onto my fabric, I'll take my Easy Press and put it on a portion of the transfer, and then I push the timer so that it tells me how long before I need to move it to the next portion. So once it finally gets down, I'm going to take off the transfer tape, and I did have to do it a few times for it to actually adhere to the canvas, but once it cooled and it looked like it was on there, then I could remove that transfer tape. So now I'm going to put it together using my sewing machine, and you could use fabric tack or even your hot glue gun if you wanted to, but I just sewed down that one hem that's folded over for the pocket in the back to replace the pillows every time I want to change it out. And then I'm going to fold it back into thirds, making sure that my design is smack in the middle of that middle portion. And then I'm going to sew along both of those sides so that it's all nice and secure. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but my sewing machine, which my mother-in-law bought me years and years ago, the light bulb went out right as I started sewing. So I guess I have to get another light bulb. Anyway, then I'm going to cut off all my stringies, and then I cut little angles at each of the corners so that when you turn it inside out, it's not all bulky and you can get nice, good, crisp corners. So a couple of things I wanted to mention. First of all, both of these iron-on vinyls say that they are washable and permanent. So I haven't tested it out yet, but once I do wash it, I will let you guys know how that turns out. The other thing is this canvas that I get from Walmart has kind of an odd smell to it. So you may want to wash this before you actually use it in your project. And that might be a good idea too, in case there's any shrinkage and then your pillow won't fit anymore. So anyway, do as I say, not as I do. I am really glad that I did this project, even though it was my very first time using any kind of heat transfer vinyl, but I learned a lot in this process, and I didn't do a great job when I was pulling off the transfer tape from the pumpkin. It was just a little stubborn, and I kind of pulled some of it off, but it just makes it rustic and gives it more character, I think. So here it is, all finished, and I think even with my little mistakes, it looks so sweet and cute, and I really love this neutral color palette and my buffalo check. So anyway, I'll do better next time, but I love it, and I hope you guys like it too. For our next project, we're going to be using one of the stacked pumpkin signs, a chenille stem, some buffalo check ribbon, a tall skinny galvanized bucket, and then some greenery I got from a sweet viewer, and I'll tell you about that later, and then some pretty white flowers. I ended up not using the leaves, and then a beautiful color palette of Waverly chalk paint in white, celery, pool, nimbus, ink, and moss. And then some floral foam, my scissors, hot glue gun, a skewer, and some wire cutters. And so the first thing I did was painted my 3 pumpkins, and I'm starting with my moss, celery, pool, and white. And so what I wanted to do was make the lightest pumpkin at the top and then gradually get darker, not necessarily in an ombre effect because I want this to be all nicely blended and shaded. So I also want to use different colors and do my greens and my blues. I ended up at the end, and you'll see this in a bit, changing it from mostly green and adding more of the blue in there. Once this paint dries, it actually dries darker, and so you'll see it's still pretty and you could use it this way, but I did want some more of that blue palette in there. So I end up kind of redoing it. But the first result was really pretty too, so I'm going to show that to you guys. So all I'm going to do in both cases is load my brush with some white, and then on the side I'm going to use my colors. And so when you put it onto your surface, it just blends so pretty and makes it look all shaded. And I just go kind of following the bumpity bumps, and that makes it look like it's going with the texture of a 3D pumpkin, if that makes sense. And then in the middle, I kind of make a sideways eyeball shape so that you're looking at the pumpkin head on, and that's what you would see. I don't know if that makes sense. So now I'm going to use one of these chippy brushes from Amazon, and I'm just going to pull off a couple rows of my jute twine so I don't get paint on it. I still managed to get paint on it, but I'm just going to use my Waverly chalk paint in white and get that covered with a couple of coats. So once all of my pumpkins are nice and dry, I'm going to take some jute twine, and using some hot glue, I'm going to wrap my stem, which is actually the top of the witch's hat, but we're going to change this into the stem of our pumpkins. So I'm just going to start at the tip where it's the skinniest and work my way around, and I'm only going to go to about the place where it gets super fat. So most of this is going to be covered up anyway. So once I get to the end, I'm going to feed that jute twine through some of the wrapped portions and then just tie a knot in that. So then I went back to my white bucket, and originally I was going to make this into an enamelware type finish, but then once I got it done, I just really didn't like it. There weren't enough bumps or creases or places to do it, and I tried to make it work, but I just didn't like it, and so I'm going to go back and change it into just a rustic distressed paint effect with my ink chalk paint. And that's just one of the beauties of using paint in a project. If you mess up or don't like the look of something, you can just go right back over it and start from scratch. So now I'm going to take my hot glue gun and reapply my jute twine to the top part of my bucket, and then I'm going to go back in with my white chalk paint over my black and my enamelware, and which actually looked like cow print. And so I'm going to kind of blend in that bottom, and then I'm going to go back in with a dry brush with my Waverly chalk paint in ink. And you'll see there's one spot where I got too much on it, and so I just go in again with my white until I get it to the look that I want. So I had a viewer that said that she always had problems getting the right size of decal onto her projects. And so I'm going to show you how I do this so that I get the right size most of the time for what project I'm doing. So I'm first going to measure all 3 of my pumpkins, and then I'm going to go to my silhouette suite, and over on the left hand side there's a box icon, and so I'm going to choose the square, and then I'm just going to go over to the cutting mat and I'm going to make a square just about the size that it looks to me. But then I'm going to go up to the top portion of my screen, and it's got the measurements of that square. So it's highlighted up here in the blue, and I'm going to put in there 5 by 2.5 inches. And then once you hit enter, it'll be that size of the box. And so then I'm going to take my word that I'm going to cut out, and in this case it's going to say grateful, thankful, and blessed. And so I just type the word out and then highlight it, change it to the font that I want to make it, and then I'm going to place it inside of that box and get it stretched until it's exactly the size that I need for my pumpkin. And I'll do that for all 3 pumpkins. So now I'm going to cut this out of my black matte vinyl that I get from FRISCO Crafts, and I'll have that linked in the description box below, and then I'll also have it in my Amazon store. So once I get everything cut out, I'm going to pull off the top part of my vinyl, and then I'm going to go back in and weed out the insides of my letters using my pen pin. And then I'm going to use my FRISCO Craft transfer tape and put that on top of everything, pull off the backing sheet, and then I'll be ready to apply it to my pumpkins. So now I'm going to embellish the top part of our pumpkins, and I got this cute pic from a sweet viewer, Stephanie, in Jacksonville, Florida, and she sent me so many perky prizes, and I've been getting a lot of perky prizes, you guys, and I love it. So anyway, thank you, Stephanie. And she sent me some really awesome homemade cards too. I'll have to show you guys later. Anyway, so now I'm going to make a buffalo check ribbon using my Dollar Tree buffalo check. And so I just do the fold over method, and I did 3 loops on each side, and I crunch it down in the middle, and then using a chenille stem, I'm going to wrap it around the center and tie it in the back. And then I'm going to poof out my little loops, and I'm going to go one to the right, one to the left, and one in the center. And then I'm going to dovetail the ends by folding it in half and then cutting at an angle. And I know you guys have seen me do this 100,070,011 times, but in case you haven't seen it, there you go. So now I'm going to hot glue that onto the side part, and that covers up all of the witchy hat and stuff. So, and it's also cute. So now I'm going to take the sides and attach those to the sides of my pumpkins, and then make sure those get glued down as well. So now I'm going to take my bucket, and I'm going to take some of that floral foam and stick it in there. And because it's kind of light, I went ahead and added some rocks to it because it might be a little top heavy since our pumpkins are so tall. So now I'm going to take my white flowers, and I'm just going to start poking those in so that they're overlapping the lip of my bucket. And I ended up just using the white flowers instead, just because there was so much color going on in the pumpkins. So once I got those all in, I'm going to take my skewer and attach that to the back part of my pumpkins. And I just used my hot glue and got that all nice and tight and secure. And then I'm going to push that into my floral foam. And then I took those mini pumpkins in the white color, and I'm popping those in as well. So since Jesus is the reason why I'm grateful, thankful, and blessed, I thought I'd give him a little shout out by attaching this wooden cross to my bucket. So all I did was use my Waverly wax in antique and got that all nicely stained. And then I'm going to take some jute twine and feed it through the hole at the top, and then tie a knot, and then I'll wrap that around the jute twine that's on the bucket already. And here it is all finished, and I think this is so cutie patootie. I know these aren't the traditional fall colors, but I just feel like the greens and the blues are so cool and clean looking, and Lord knows we need that in this heat wave that we're having here right now. We've been in the triple digits for I think about a month, so this definitely makes it seem cooler in the house. Anyway, I love this, and I hope you guys like it too. For our next project, we're going to be using this square wire wreath form, and then this Friends Gather Here sweet little sign. Both of those are from Dollar Tree. And then I got this burlap ribbon from Walmart for $4.88. It's 5.5 inches by 30 feet. And I did the math, and for the Dollar Tree burlap ribbon, it's 2.5 inches by 6 feet. And so you'd have to get 5 of those to be the same length, and this is 5.5 inches compared to 2.5. So it's a way better deal. And then I'll also be using some of these little mini pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a chenille stem, and I'm going to wrap that around the inside bar of my wreath, and then I'm going to take the end of my burlap and attach that to that chenille stem and just twist that around so that that stays in place. Then I'm going to take that burlap and I'm going to shove some through the first and second bar and then some through the second and third bar. And then I'm going to pull it and gather it together and then do that again, holding them in place until it gets tight enough when they're gathered in place. It's kind of hard to explain, so maybe just watching it, you'll understand. So then once you get to the end, you're gonna attach your burlap using that same chenille stem and just twist it around, cut it off, and then cut your burlap off. And then you even have some left over for another project. So now I'm gonna take some green ribbon from Dollar Tree as well as some oyster color burlap ribbon from burlapfabric.com, and I'll have that listed in the description box below. And I'm just going to use an Olivia bow, I like to call this, where you just fold it over end, and then I'm going to do 3 loops on each side. And I put the burlap on top of the green ribbon and then just did it as if it was one piece of ribbon. So then I'm going to get the center and I'm going to make little slits so that I can feed my chenille stem in there, and then you can move the little loops easier that way so that you can get them intertwined. I ended up not liking it this way for this particular project, but I thought I would show you how to make one anyway. But I do end up taking this apart, and I wanted to have the loops different sizes instead of just completely round. And then I also attached them separately with 2 different chenille stems. So now to attach my wood sign, I'm going to use a big fat nail and a hammer, and I put down a piece of scrap wood on my table so I wouldn't make a hole into my table. And I'm just going to hammer those holes in because I'm going to attach this using some paddle wire, and I'm just going to feed the wire through those holes, and then I'm going to attach it to the back part of my wire wreath. And before I tighten the small wire to the wreath, I'm going to make sure that it's centered or positioned in the place that I want it. I wanted the little pumpkin at the bottom to show a little bit more, so I made it a little bit higher than exactly centered. So then I was noticing I didn't really love the glitter on this sign, so I just took some sandpaper and decided to distress it, and it turns out so stinking cute. And so I just went about my business and finished attaching it to the back of my wreath form. So now I'm going to take a wheat stem and I'm going to separate it in 2 halves using my wire cutters, and I'm going to attach those using a chenille stem so that they're in a little bunch, and then I can attach it to my wreath form as well on either side of my bow. Some of this wheat had some orangey colored leaves, and I really didn't want that because I wanted to stay with the color palette that was already on the sign. So these were perfect because they had just the yellowy color and that green. So then I took some of my mini pumpkins, and I'm going to attach a few here and there, and I just coupled one larger one with a smaller one, and then I'm going to take some of the green and yellowy leaves from my fall leaf stem and put those right behind a couple of those pumpkins. And here it is all finished, and I love how this turned out. I'm really loving this green against the monochromatic background. I don't think there's really a color that I don't like as long as it's nice and soft, but I feel like it's really traditional even though there's no orange in there. But then because it's a square wreath, it gives it a modern feel as well. So I don't know, I just love it, and I hope you guys like it too. So a lot of you have been asking about our sweet grandson, Connor. This is him. He's so stinking adorable. He's a little over 3 months now, and here he is with Gaga, also known as my mommy. And now here's with Daddy after getting out of the pool. I think that would have been his first swim. Anyway, on with our next project. So I'm just going to take a big piece of scrap wood, and we don't even really remember what this was from, but it's some kind of plywood that Michael J had in the garage. I was going to have him cut it down, but then I realized I might as well just leave it this size because it will work. I want to make one of those tall signs for the front porch for when I do my fall decorating. So I don't know if you guys remember, but I had mentioned that we finally got our house painted after 4 years of living here. And guess what color we painted it? It's white. And so in order for it to stand out, I decided to paint it black. And so I'm just going to sand it down. I'm going to paint it black using a regular paint roller, and then I'm going to go back in with some white and nimbus stripes to kind of create a little bit of a plaid pattern. You can see there's still some nooks and crannies on there, and it's not perfectly smooth, but I did want it to still look semi like a piece of wood. So what I did was I measured out, and I'm going to be making different widths of my stripes going horizontally. So I measured 2 inches, then 5 inches, and then 3 inches, and then 1 inch. And then using a T-square, I just made the lines across my board, and then I'm going to go back in with my painter's tape and mask those so I can paint them in. I did end up adding another 1/2 inch line in there in that 5 inch space. So it's technically 1/2 inch and then 4.5 inches. And the board itself is 56 inches by 16 3/4 inches. And I think it's the perfect size for our entryway. So anyway, I had originally planned to use my stencil tape that I get from Frisco Craft, and I was going to make the lines that way, but I thought that the painter's tape would be quicker. It was quicker, but it did have some bleeding. So there are ways to get around that. You can actually put down some Mod Podge first and then paint your tape, or you can paint the stripes again with the regular black that you have as the base. And these are all tips that I've gotten from my sweet viewers out there who see me struggle with bleeding every now and then. So anyway, I just touched up my lines a little later on so they're not too noticeable. So anyway, I went in with my Nimbus, and I'm going to do the larger stripes in that, which is a really light gray. And then the smaller ones I did in white. And then I'm going to do some vertical lines in the white and Nimbus also. Really, the most challenging part of this project was just figuring out where to put my stripes and how to space them. But once you got that figured out, then it's a breeze. So it did take a couple of coats for each of the stripes, and then I'm just going to remove my painter's tape. And there's something about pulling that tape off that I absolutely love. But what's even more fun is when you pull off stencil tape. But I'll show you that in a second. So for the vertical stripes, I kind of just eyeballed that and went down a couple of inches, and I used my 2-inch tape and my 1-inch tape. And then that gave me different sizes. And I'm only going to do this on the left side of my board. So now I'm going to use my FRISCO Craft stencil tape, and because I'm going to be doing such a long sign, I'm not going to be using a mat. So I just adjust my rollers and I place my stencil tape directly into the machine to cut out my stencil. So you guys have seen me use my pen that I got from my sweet viewer Cindy, but I also found this same type of thing at the Dollar Tree, and it works pretty well also. So when you're weeding out a stencil, you're obviously going to pull out the letters themselves instead of pulling up the outside parts of the vinyl like you do on your decals. So now I'm going to take some transfer tape that I get from FRISCO Craft, and they have 3 different strengths of tackiness on their transfer tape. So I'm using the medium tack. Usually I get my transfer tape from the Dollar Tree, but they've been kind of MIA from the shelves. So FRISCO Craft was nice enough to send me all 3 of those different types of transfer tape. So I'm really loving it too because it's very firm and not as flimsy as the Dollar Tree or Walmart kind. And both of those work completely fine too, but this is just on a different level. I'll have this transfer tape listed in the description box below, as well as the stencil tape too. And they're vinyl, and so pretty much everything that they sell, I'll have it listed. Anyway, so I'm going to take another piece of transfer tape for my top part of my stencil, which is going to say "So Very," and then the bottom part is going to say "Thankful," going vertically. So then I'm going to take my pumpkin chalk paint and I'm going to use a little dauber to get that paint on there. And because it is so tightly adhered to the board, you could actually just paint it right on there and not even have to use the dauber, because my forearm is a little sore now. Anyway, I love taking up transfer tape, and I love the way this leaves such a perfect crisp line. And if this was a smooth surface, there would be absolutely zero bleeding after you paint it. I get a lot of questions from viewers asking if I take my tape off while the paint is still wet or if I wait until after it's dry. And it's really personal preference, but I always take it off while it's wet. One, because I don't have a lot of patience and I'm excited to see it. But also, if I've mixed some paint, I might want to take it off then so that if I need to do any touch-ups, I can use that same paint mixture. So it's really just up to you. And then I'm going to paint the top part that says "So Very." And here it is all done. And I think this is my favorite. I love how this turned out. Again, I love black and white with that pop of color with this orange. And I really love this orange, especially for fall and Halloween. And against my newly painted white house, I think it looks so pretty. This is not how it's going to be set up when we do the entryway decor, but I just set it up here for you guys to see it in this reveal. So here's the wreath that I did and another DIY that I did, and I'll have those videos linked in the description box below. But I love how this turned out. It's not perfect, but I bet it looks really good from the street. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider subscribing. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!